Surf's up, guys. It's Mauisnake here for SkinClub, and I'm going to be going over my top 20 players of 2024 thus far. This list is not necessarily complete, given that I am recording this on the 24th of September. This is after ESL Pro League Season 20 has finished, right before the Blast Fall Finals, and this is the current positions that I have all of the players in that are in the top 20. Starting off, first, KSCERATO, number 20, just squeaked in over a couple of the other players. What I am using here on this list before you is the top 20 ranking filter, LAN matches for the year thus far. Looking at KSCERATO's numbers, he is at a 1.14 rating. He's actually higher than many of the other people that I have ranked above him on the entire list. And if we look at it, yeah, he's got great numbers overall. He's putting up 78.8 ADR. He's had some really solid events in total, and you can see that at some of the big ones hasn't always really kept it up. You can see that at the major, the main part of the major, he only put up a 1.08 rating. But I'm just going to say that the consistency that this guy has shown, despite having a Furia that is floundering, to me is worth a commend. And that is why I am putting him in the top 20. A couple people might pass him later on in the year, guys. I feel like Ema's been on the up and up along with Woxic. I think Rops has also been correcting some of the poor form that he had earlier on in the year. But as of right now, I'm working through stats, the eye test, the fact that the team around KSCERATO has really not held up its end of the bargain. And yet he still consistently puts up at pretty big events some overall strong ratings. His most disastrous performance, though, so far has been Cologne, where Furia and him came in last place. But other than that, a sea of green. So next up, we've got Twistzz. Unfortunately for Twistzz, I want to put him up higher in terms of his individual form, but the events that him and Liquid have played are very limited. You could see that compared to even KSCERATO's land page, that there's just so many events that are missing. He never does badly, but it's just that him and his team don't really ever go far. You can see that, yeah, overall, the best finish that him and Liquid have had at a real LAN has been 5th to 6th at Chengdu. Not obviously counting the play-in. That just means you qualified for Cologne. 5th to 8th, I guess you could say, is pretty similar at ESL Pro League, the most recent season, and the Pro League before it. Overall, he's doing really well. I would love to move Twistzz up. I hope by the end of the year I can move him up, but the fact that he missed the major and at the actual RMR didn't even perform all that well is incredibly concerning. And I'm going to show you right here really the matches that do hurt his case quite a bit. In the match against Complexity to try to qualify, he put up a 0.99. And in all honesty, this is the most important series that Twistzz has played all year, and unfortunately, he wasn't able to deliver in it. Now, next up, Zontix, not really the same numbers as Twistzz, but overall, you're going to see that Zontix has just had a huge body of work. And I feel like that his highs have led to some of the championships which Spirit have found so far this year. You can see that every time they win a tournament, it bet Boom Dasha Belgrade, IM Katowice, the Blast Spring Final, he's putting up a 1.16 or above in all three of those events with top 20 filter on. And that is incredibly impressive for a rookie player, especially one that body shots a lot on top of it. He's definitely doing his job. He doesn't have the consistency that some of the people that are higher than him have, but the fact that he's doing it on the biggest stages definitely deserves a spot in the top 20. Now, I think one pick here that's going to be a bit contentious is twistzz, 1.13 rating. Doesn't necessarily have the same hardware that Zontix does. They've won a Bet Boom event. They've won an ESL Pro League season. In both of those events, twistzz went crazy, by the way. He put up a 1.32 in the earlier Bet Boom event this year, and at the major itself, he put up a 1.27. And I think a lot of people might even think that there's people that I ranked lower than twistzz, even people that are on this list. Zontix, Twistzz, KSCERATO, Ema, Woxic, Rops. And you might say to yourself, surely they're better than twistzz. But I'm just going to show you right now that in arenas, this is with arena ratings of all of 2024, twistzz has been the best player for Maus in those arena type of environments. So if we sort this out by arena ranking, you can see right here that twistzz has a 1.12 rating in arenas. You can see that players that are also on his team, say Yimpat, who you might rank higher than him, say Brolin, say Shuhei, I think even XertioN is down here somewhere. Yeah, all of them have really fallen off in arenas. But when you look at Twistzz, he's doing well. People got mad about what happened at the major, how the betting website actually, how CSGO Empire just ran onto the stage, and Twistzz was the only person that kind of walked away from that with his head held high, that he didn't really, his performance didn't drop off from that. He's not hitting the highs that some of the other players on his team are hitting, but definitely deserves a nod. Now, next up, Wonderful. I feel like this guy has in many ways been kind of overrated as a player on Navi. You can see land top 20. He's got a 1.15. He does well against all of the top opposition, but players like Bit, people like JL are slightly outperforming him in rating. And the thing is that Wonderful he's had some good consistency, you can see from these numbers, but he has a really bad knack in grand finals of falling off. And pressure is a privilege, but at this point, Wonderful has had a lot of bad marks in these grand finals. You can see here at EWC grand finals that his rating was just not really up to par with some of the other players on his team. In fact, he was the lowest rated in the grand finals of EWC with a 1.06 rating. You're going to see that at EPL, despite the fact that him and Navi just won that, he did well here. He actually did do well here, but didn't really pop off the page. Like 1.11, this is his best grand final thus far, but here are some other ones. We got the Copenhagen Major grand final performance, and honestly, if it were 5 Wonderfuls in the server, they're not beating FaZe. 0.93 rating, worst player on Navi once again. And then we can see also Cologne over here. Another performance that really was hurt by what he did in the grand finals, or what he lacked. And that is a 1.00 rating, second lowest on his team in that one. Just doesn't really shine in the biggest moments for Navi. And on top of that, the spring final, which he faced off against Spirit, once again had a very poor grand final by his standards. And you can see right here that, yeah, look at the rating overall, 0.97. Just a consistently in grand finals, this guy is not doing well. ESL Pro League was a little bit of a changing of the script, but a rewriting of the script perhaps. But honestly, and unfortunately, Wonderful is not really the reason that Navi has won the tournaments that they have. He's helping them get there, but not helping them close out. Next up, Yimpat. A lot of people think this guy should be rated a lot higher. I understand that. He is, to me, one of the best anchor lurker players in the game today, but his arena performances are very poor. And on top of that, he does fall off pretty significantly versus top 5 opponents. 1.05 rating over 26 of his 86 maps on LAN. So I don't even really think you can invoke the sample size argument that easily when a third of his games are against top 5 opponents on LAN, and yet in those games, he is significantly worse than the rating he's getting against lower tiered opposition. And once again, against in arenas, 1.05. Yeah, it's pretty good. Like, it's better than XertioN, better than Brolin, better than Shuhei on his team. But you compare that with some of the other people that I have higher in this list, and they hold their nerve much better. You know, roll for roll, Bit has just been an overall better player, and he's been better in arenas too, as you can see right here. There's even some people that I didn't even include on the arena list or in my top 20 list that rank better than him in arenas. So another problem with him right there, and Spinx would be one of those players. 1.14 rating overall, does very well versus top 5 opposition, 1.10 rating, and that's 28 of his 97 maps at this point. He's not really even falling off that much because he has a 1.14 against pretty much everybody on these LAN stages, and top 5 opponents 1.10. That's very strong, and you're going to see that, yeah, in arenas a 1.11 rating overall. I think Spinx has grown with the experience that he's gained on Vitality right now. I'm not trying to make this all about stats, but I mean, I think the numbers do speak for themselves in this way as to why I put him higher than Yimpat. Now, XertioN is the one guy that definitely fails the arena test, but I'm going to give him so much credit for what he's doing and the ceiling that he's reached in some of these tournaments that Maus is winning. Could have been the MVP of ESL Pro League Season 19. That's 2 seasons ago when he put up a 1.35. ZywOo took it from him, and I will also say that at the Bet Boom event, he was incredibly strong there. I think that there is a lot of value right now if you have an entry fragger that is this explosive. Unfortunately, some of the lows that we see from XertioN come on the biggest stages too, and you'll see that LAN, top 20, when he's facing off against top 5 opponents, he's actually even lower than Yimpat. And if you even go to big events for this, it again falls down just a little bit more. And I think that when it comes to some of the biggest stages, yeah, XertioN has really not held up his end of the bargain. 0.98 rating overall in arenas this year. That's just so far beneath what you would expect from him in a studio environment. And that's why he's not making it into my top 10. And that's why Bit is a spot higher, despite the fact that Bit hasn't necessarily reached the same heights in some of the events that he's played. EWC was an excellent one, kind of punctuated the point that Bit right now is one of the best lurkers, best anchor players in the world. Also surprisingly cerebral. I can't put him in the top 10 though, because the start of his year wasn't that special. 1.07 at the major itself that they won really wasn't talked about until map 3 of the grand finals versus FaZe, where he popped off against them. But throughout much of that event, it was other people who were really carrying Bit. And you can see that there's this slew of red in what was otherwise a really great shining moment at the very end. His highest rated map, it was the final map of the entire tournament, but it came a little bit late, and some of his good performances are sort of against weaker opposition too. The fact that 2 of his good games are against Pain, Mongols, Cloud9, Eternal Fire. Sure, we talk about those teams in high regard at this point, but when you talk about them versus Spirit, he didn't really do that well. When you talk about him versus G2, he was definitely carried in that series. Like, even looking at how he did in the series versus G2, 0.9 rating, lowest rated for his team, and had everybody played like Bit, there's no championship for Navi to speak of if Bit was the only person joining the server that day. Now, above him, broky. Feel like he has been incredibly contentious lately, slotting at my number 11. Still a very explosive opper. I feel like he's been actually kind of mischaracterized. I wouldn't say he's aggressive. It's just that he kind of wiles out in the later stages of a round. Incredibly wild clutches. Definitely passes the eye test as a highlight machine, but consistency has been a bit waning in the later part of the year. He did very well at the major itself, 1.21 rating there, 1.21 rating where he captured the MVP at Chengdu, helping FaZe win it there. Famously talked about the fact that he was basically just playing arms race in the lead up for that event, as they were pretty bummed. Him and FaZe were bummed out after their major loss, but still was able to basically put up the exact same performance rating wise that he did at the major. So maybe you guys should just play a little bit more arms race. Did you ever think about that? But unfortunately, some of the faults in FaZe and their decline in form have been due to him, and some of the reasons that they've lost events has been due to him, because he can be a little bit crazy, definitely mistake prone, definitely doesn't value his life as much as some of the other oppers that are a little bit higher than him in this list. But I feel like the ceiling that we've seen in big moments is especially important. And when you look at actually arena performances, 1.13 rating for broky, that says a lot to me. That really does say a lot. He's a big game player, and he is tied with Frozen for the highest rated for FaZe in arenas. And that's talking about playing with Rops, Rain, and obviously Kerrigan wouldn't be topping the board, but around experienced veterans who are usually known to be good arena players, it's actually been broky and Frozen who have led the charge for FaZe. Now, flameZ, actually a slightly lower rating than a lot of the people here. You're going to see that actually if you look at this list, going back to the LAN 2024 top 20, flameZ, you have to kind of scroll down. He's actually lower than a few of the people that I've already ranked. And so you might be wondering, why do I have flameZ so high? And once again, I'm going to cite the fact that this guy has been a big stage player. Also, him on entries has been very darn good. And the biggest thing for me also, he powers up versus the top teams. If there is any person right now that is definitively a big game player, it is absolutely flameZ, because he actually gets better. 1.13 for top 20 LAN rating, but 1.16 versus top 5 opponents. And let me show you something crazy. Arena rating, he is got a 1.19 for the year right now. And Vitality are reaching a lot of arenas, by the way. He's actually only 0.09 behind ZywOo on his own team, and he's above some of the best big name players in the world right now. SkinClub, NiKo, broky, Frozen. flameZ is doing better than all of them. I would love to put him even higher, but obviously I have to count some of the performance performances that he's having in group stages, some of the performances that he's having at earlier parts of a tournament in general, and those aren't necessarily serving him so well. But I love what flameZ has been doing this year, and what a glow up that he has had. Now, next up, EliGE. EliGE hasn't had the reps on stages with complexity. In fact, they haven't even been making it as far, but he is doing God's work on this team. It oftentimes feels like the only reason that complexity has the upset potential, the firepower, the consistency that they have reached this year is because of him. Because of EliGE, this team is constantly contending in a position of the top 10. If everybody else was performing to EliGE's level, they would be a top 5 team in the world. They'd be a top 3 team in the world, perhaps even. But unfortunately, they are not. And so it's sort of a similar penalization as the one we have for Twistzz, where EliGE, by rating alone, is really quite up there. In fact, he's neck and neck with Twistzz. They both have a 1.16 rating. And to EliGE's credit, there is a greater sample size, 22 more maps on LAN against top 20 opponents, or with the top 20 filter. And they are going deeper in tournaments, and he actually played at the major. So a lot of reasons to give EliGE this one. And another thing is that he does fall off against the top opposition, but the reason that I rank him above flameZ, because I feel like people might be thinking right now, well, what flameZ is doing it on bigger stages, better rating in arenas because EliGE is not playing them. I think of it like this with the eye test, guys. It's very simple. If EliGE was there for flameZ, would Vitality be better? Okay, the case is closed. The answer to your question is right there in front of you, and you would probably come up with a similar answer as I would. So that's it. It's really sometimes as simple as that. You can do all the torturing of the statistics and numbers as you want, but by the eye test alone and knowing how EliGE is as an overall player in terms of his consistency, you know that Vitality could improve if they had EliGE over flameZ, and that is why I ranked him one spot higher, despite the fact that the stats could be moved in either direction, and you can take a different side if you really want to try to just break down the entire debate via numbers alone. Frozen up next. Very different role, a little bit slower as a player, but he's been the pillar of consistency for FaZe. For a tumultuous year for FaZe where they have reached some pretty nice highs, couple second places at Katowice, at the major itself, winning Chengdu, they've also had their flaws. They have crashed out of a couple events. They barely made top 8 at EPL, losing to complexity there. Actually, no, they came into 16th at the most one where they lost to complexity, but they actually only got top 8 at EPL season 19. Dallas, they didn't do too well either, barely making playoffs at that. And it feels like FaZe right now, they're a safe bet to make playoffs, but they're not making those super deep runs that gives anybody on their team a real shot of being much higher on this list. And so Frozen, I love his game. I think he's been fantastic. In stage matches, he's been amazing too, 1.13 rating. But it's almost like if I were to just put him on any team, he could fit and make practically anybody better, especially given the role that he plays. He doesn't always command the most resources. Sometimes it's Rain, sometimes it's Rops, sometimes it's even broky, who get a little bit more emphasis on the team. But you could throw Frozen in almost any situation, and even that's early round, mid round, late round, and he's such a complete player at such a young age that he definitely merits a number 8 spot for me, even though FaZe hasn't had the most success as an overall team. Now, number 7, one of my favorite entry fraggers of the year. I'm glad that Eternal Fire has been on the come up because XANTARES has been a monster. 1.19 rating overall. You look at it by pure rating alone, and he's the 5th highest overall right now, with just behind Shiro. And XANTARES isn't padding his stats with saving. His DPR at 0.66 it's good. It technically says good there on HLTV, but versus some of the other people that are at the top of this list, that's not necessarily groundbreaking, and he's not necessarily saving a lot. He is going for a lot of opening kills. As you can see right here, he's going for 27.5% of the opening attempts for Eternal Fire, and he's winning over half the time. That's broken. That's just flat out broken. That is exceptionally good, and he doesn't necessarily have the best numbers versus the best opponents in the world, but I look at the team that he's on, and I think about how he also, similar to EliGE, has lifted them above and beyond, and I will say that XANTARES to me has been the better player than EliGE this year. He has he has willed Eternal Fire deep into tournaments, more so than EliGE has, and I feel like this guy is even less error prone than EliGE, whereas EliGE sometimes can maybe get overheated. Sometimes he will perhaps even bring some kind of just like he thinks he needs to do a little bit more than he has to for the team, but XANTARES, I feel like he calms himself in those moments a little bit quicker, and in a moment of uncertainty, his first reaction isn't necessarily to push, whereas for EliGE, sometimes I think he does have that sort of thought, and it does get him in trouble. Now I'm moving into what I consider, I guess, the A tier of the remaining players. Shiro for me. By rating alone, you'd want to put him as 4th, okay? I understand that, but the problem with me with Shiro is that rating is oftentimes inflated by DPR. Shiro is tending to not die a lot, and I actually am going to mentally punish him in the rating department because of that. If you look at his clutch stats over here on the HLTV page, on saves per round loss, he has 14.4%. That is incredibly high. That is incredibly high. That practically speaking, 14% of the rounds that Spirit are losing, he's saving. If I want to show you NiKo, for example, who I ranked higher than him, NiKo is only saving 8.3%, and this is a much more normal number for a player. And even some other oppers, like, say, ZywOo, are not saving that much. ZywOo right here, 8.6% of the time is he saving on round losses. So Shiro, sometimes, for my money, is too quickly identifying that a round is lost and not actually going for it, and that passivity has actually penalized him quite a bit for me. On top of that, Shiro is just unfortunately never going to be the MVP of his team when he's right beside Donk, who has been a transcendent player this year. So tournaments where I feel like Shiro really showed what he was made of are definitely Katowice, when he was the right-hand man to Donk in their run. And also, I want to say the spring final. I think the spring final, there was a true opportunity for Shiro to actually be the MVP of this tournament, because in the win versus Vitality, Shiro was a monster. 1.30 rating, multiple clutches as an individual, showed rifling prowess, showed opping prowess, seriously was the difference maker on a couple of these maps for him and Spirit. And on top of that, he was very strong in the grand finals, and Donk did edge him out at the end of it with way more ADR. But once again, Shiro was so good. +7 in first kill differential. He had 11 first kills in this series, 4 deaths in a round, 4 first deaths, and he almost beat Donk. Like, he almost actually had more entries than Donk, who had 13 entries in that series as well. It's just that Donk was always going to be the star. Next up, NiKo. So NiKo didn't really win anything this year as the MVP. In Dallas, he was the second in command behind Mauisnake. But to NiKo's credit, he was in-game leading for this event. And that's something where, at the end of the day, I'm not really going to put an IGL on these top 20 lists almost ever. But I give him a little bit of credit for that. And I do want to say that the consistency should be applauded. Like, the fact that he only has one event this year with a sub 1.0 KD, and it's the Blast Spring Finals, where G2 were playing with Mauisnake landing off of a plane that day. NiKo was overextending himself. Everybody from G2 was not playing how they should have been, because the first series they were playing with TAZ. The second one, Mauisnake just literally got off the plane, showed up to the event. And so I forgive practically everybody on G2 for this event. I just think that the circumstances were so messed up that it's very hard to really penalize them for it. Beyond that, I think NiKo had a little bit of a slow start this year. At the Copenhagen Major, he had a 1.11 rating, and I feel like that event alone is the event that I value the most this year, guys. Like, I do need to say that beyond Katowice and Cologne, I mean, it's those two in the major that are really what are gonna do the most heavy lifting for me in terms of value of all of these statistics. I'm going to count those way more than something like a Chengdu, something like a Spring Groups, something like a EWC, the RMR itself. Yeah, like this is a high number and all. That's nice, but it's not the major. It's in a studio. It's not as big. That being said, in arenas, NiKo's still a monster. 1.15 rating overall, still very impressive. Can't really knock him for that. Same exact rating as Shiro in arenas, but once again, he's playing an entry role, which is generally more prone to get bad ratings, just because if you're going to save more, DPR and KST are so valued in HLTV rankings and ratings that I penalize people for that. If you save too much like Shiro does, then I'm not going to reward you for a high number rating when I know that number is created because you're just not going for rounds that people like NiKo and like Donk, like ZywOo, like mauisnake would even go for. So that's why he's there. And this is also the last member of the A tier. It is JL, 1.16 rating overall. Has kept up such great form after the major. Sure, his numbers are lower than NiKo's and Shiro's, 1.23, 1.19, and JL's at the 1.16 here, but in arenas, this guy has better numbers than both of them. 1.17 rating overall. He won the major MVP, was the reason that they were even able to make it to the grand finals over G2. If you look back at this event and you look at what he did in those semifinals, this is an absurd map 3, and it should be talked about like Bits map 3 in the grand finals. 1.88 in a game that was 13-11. Like, every single kill here mattered. This isn't just a farm for the sake of farming and your whole team's doing well. This is JL putting the team on his back and making sure that they secured a position in the grand finals. Overall rating for the series, mauisnake did do better than him, but nah, JL was the reason that if he performed even 5% worse in the series, it's G2 in the grand finals, and maybe mauisnake, NiKo, and Hunter have a major trophy under their belt. Maybe HooXi's even on the same team. But JL, in a sense, he actually got HooXi fired. He actually was the reason that they didn't make the grand finals. And if they had lost this one, just Navi, that is, their team might have broken up. Wonderful might not be on the team for Simple at this point. Like, think of all of the different narratives that could have happened, could have occurred, how many storylines could have been upended if JL was just 5% worse this day. If he just got a couple less kills in that map 3, would have been a monstrous difference in the timeline of Counter-Strike. And JL already has massive cultural impact for what he did here. Next up, ZywOo, mauisnake, Donk. By rating alone, you would want to say that ZywOo should be right behind Donk, that mauisnake should be third, but I'm going to give you the reason right now that these players are where they are. I'm going to add to context, I am Katowice right here. I am going to add into context, I am Cologne 2024 right here, and I am going to add the PGL Major Copenhagen 2024 right here. So now you can see all of those ratings combined, and these to me are the most prestigious events of the year. And when you are grading people that are already transcendent, that are already in my S tier of players overall for this year, it is actually very clear who has been the best, second best, and third best. I would like to invoke the eye test beyond this, and so I will explain to you how I see these players beyond just the numbers, which already show that when I talk about the 3 prestige events of the year, that Donk, mauisnake, and ZywOo are orders as following. ZywOo at number 3. For the first half of the year, he was flat out rifling too much. ZywOo, for the first half of the year, the gun that he had the most kills with was the AK. He was actually holding back Vitality's CT side because he would pick up the M4, M4A1S on the defensive side as opposed to rifling, or as opposed to opping, that is, and it would actually hamstring Vitality and actually change the setups that they had to run. They would have to understand that parts of the map were not under control of ZywOo, and instead of doing what mauisnake did and locking those spots down, it was actually ZywOo who decided he wanted to rifle, and sure, he's going to feel more comfortable, but to me, it was actually a fairly selfish move that cost Vitality early on in this year, and during the player break, I could tell that ZywOo and his team had a discussion. They talked about it, and that's why at Cologne, he really changed up his numbers, and yes, now his op is his highest. It has the most kills of any event or any op or any gun, but a lot of that is due to the fact that at Cologne, he just started going crazy with this gun. He started really just making it his main weapon. He started picking it up on the T side, started using the M4 less on the CT side, and this is a big reason why, for my money, he did well at Cologne, why he captured the MVP, why Vitality were able to win the event, but I feel like he just decided for whatever reason in the first half of the year that he wanted to be a hybrid, and yeah, once he started playing at Cologne, he started just playing flat out better. 1.31 rating overall at that one. That's when he started opping more, but at the major, at Katowice, was just rifling way more. And don't get me wrong, ZywOo is one of the best riflers in the world, but he is a top 2 opper in the world. And if you are a top 2 opper in the world, you are of much more value to your team than being a top 3, top 4, top 5 rifler in the world. It's just not the same. It's not the same. And ZywOo, for me, for my money, I'd say at this point in time, he is the most well-rounded player in the world. He is so good in openers. He's one of the reasons that Vitality have such a good T side. He is so good in clutches. You always feel like he has an opportunity, a chance. Doesn't matter how much the deck is stacked against him. But I just wish that in the beginning of the year, he realized what his flaws were earlier. And I think that that first half of the year is probably going to hold him back unless he has a very big Shanghai Major. Reminder, this is the 2024 list in September. Like, it's not done yet. We're not all done yet. Now, number 2, mauisnake. We're going to look at his numbers for this one. For the events that we just outlined right there, we're going to see that he has a 1.37 rating. And it's just difficult to fault this guy. It's really difficult to fault this guy. At all 3 prestige events this year, he's had a 1.35 rating or above. That is absurd. That is putting up prime simple numbers at all the events that matter the most. In arenas, by the way, he has a 1.42 rating. He is doing better in the later stages of these tournaments than he is in the earlier group stages. That is crazy. That is putting the whole team on his back for when it matters the absolute most. And mauisnake is it's just absurd. He's just crazy. It's just too good. It really is special. That being said, what he's up against has just never been seen before. mauisnake versus donk. You can tell me with a straight face, and I won't even go against you, that for whatever reason you think mauisnake is better than donk. You could say that. You know, he's got an excellent rifle. He's the best opper in the world right now. But I want to show you one statistic that really, really sells this whole thing for me. For 2024 on LAN, the damage per round win. So the amount of damage that mauisnake is inflicting every time G2 get a round win is 108. That's very good, very strong. For ZywOo this year, it's 112. In fact, actually, ZywOo's doing a little bit more. But, and that's just LAN. That's not just the 3 prestige events. Donk, though, 122. If Donk isn't putting up these kinds of numbers, Spirit have no chance. They have no chance. 122 damage per round win is just bonkers. He has the best rating between mauisnake and ZywOo at all these prestige events. His arena rating is a little bit, it's above ZywOo. It is beneath mauisnake, but the thing is that donk is going to the grand finals he went to the grand finals against flameZ. He went a little deeper. The thing about mauisnake in these arena events, by the way, is that yes, he's gone deep at a couple of these events. At Cologne, he got in the first round of playoffs, he lost. At Katowice, first round of playoffs, he lost. And at the major, second round of playoffs, he lost. Donk has pretty similar, it's kind of a similar story, honestly. But at Katowice, he went all the way, and in the grand finals had the most unbelievable grand finals that any of us have ever seen. In fact, if you actually just look at the highest rated maps for donk so far this year, This is his grand final. This is donk's grand final. He put up a 1.93. This is one of the most legendary performances in history. This was a 3-0 BO5 because donk smurfed on them on every single map. 2.06 on Nuke. On Mirage, 1.55. On Overpass, 2.38. There has never, in the history of Counter-Strike, at a prestige event in a grand final, been anything remotely close to as dominant as that from a rookie. And even if you strip away the rookie part of that, he has overall the best rating that anybody has ever had since the introduction to HLTV's rating 2.0. Even NiKo's ESL 1 New York performance, technically speaking, was in the thousands place lower than what donk did here at Katowice. It's a bigger event, it's a more prestigious event, and donk did better. And he did it over more maps. That's just too crazy for me. And beyond that, I will say, donk is playing the hardest role in the game. First in entry fragger is notoriously difficult. We have not seen anybody who has been even close as an entry player to being #1 in the world since Olaf Meister, and you wouldn't even really count him as the pure hard entry. He did go for entries, but he didn't go for entries nearly as much as donk did, who is going for opening kills 29% of the time and winning 55% of the time. They know donk is running at them, and they still can't kill him. Doesn't matter if you're flashing him, mauling him, opping him, donk is coming out ahead. And that is going to be it, guys. Those are my top 20 for the year. Thank you to SkinClub. Liked doing this. I ironed these out on my Twitch stream, so be sure to follow me on Twitch as well. And yeah, enjoy the content that you see here on SkinClub. Either way, as always, being toxic is a choice.